You folks listening to this need to wake up, watch what's happening in Venezuela. You need to get your beans, bullets, and Band-Aids squared away. Those tangible items are going to be what pulls your family through the hard times ahead.
Hey guys, welcome back. Thank you so much for tuning in. We have back on the line American author and founder of survivalblog.com, James Wesley Rawles. James was last our guest back in May 2015, and it's been far too long, as he's one of the sharpest and most distinguished minds in the survival and truth space. James, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me on, Sean.
Guys, I don't know if you know this about James, but where is this in his Wikipedia entry? I was just reading this. James is a former U.S. Army intelligence officer and probably one of the most distinguished truthers out there. James, I wanted to ask you something. The last time we talked, you said time is relatively short. We could well see the onset of a 1930s-like Great Depression. Since we last talked, James, things have only gotten worse. And in fact, in the last day or two here, we've seen the Japanese bond market absolutely implode. This thing could come down like a house of cards at any moment, and I still don't think most of our friends, neighbors, and colleagues have any idea. What's your take on the current state of the global economy?
Well, I'd say we're definitely teetering on the brink at this point. Since we last spoke, there's been the advent of negative interest rates, and that is an absolute desperation measure on the part of the central banks and the banking establishment as a whole. There is basically no chance of any genuine recovery, certainly no chance of repaying the mountains and mountains of debt that have accumulated. Essentially, all the world's currencies are in a race to the bottom, and we're in a situation where we're just waiting to see which currency collapses first and which survive. But in the long run, all of the currencies that are not backed by gold and silver are doomed. And guess what? That's pretty much all the currencies on the planet outside of perhaps, ironically, a gold-backed dinar inside of the caliphate.
Oh, well, that's interesting. Of course, you know why this nation went into Libya. That was to prevent a gold-backed currency being put into place by Gaddafi. Of course, the powers that be claimed that they were spreading democracy and trying to save the people of Libya from a maniacal dictator. Let me ask you this. I read in your Wikipedia entry here, James, I find out here that you resigned your commission as a U.S. Army captain immediately after Bill Clinton was inaugurated as President of the United States. Now, I'm not sure if you did that because you already knew the Clintons were a crime family, but boy, is it clear now what criminals they are. Are you as stunned as I am that Hillary Rotten Clinton is probably going to be the next president of this United States because she's just going to steal the election? Are you shocked that she is still on this world stage and it is being given the credibility by the Mockingbird mainstream media to even run for president, given all her litany of crimes?
Yes, it is shocking. It's actually quite demoralizing to think that someone who orchestrates a international crime family, which is essentially what the Clinton family is and what the Clinton Foundation represents,
right,
to think that she is deemed suitable for the highest office in the land is truly frightening. And we're really entering uncharted territory here. Our republic is in peril. We have a media that is marching in lockstep with the DNC political machine, and we have kind of an unknown quantity out there in the person of Donald Trump. It all depends, I guess, on who he selects for his cabinet, but Trump doesn't really thrill me either. But to think of Hillary being in office is absolutely anathema.
Yeah, it is. And as I have noted and continue to bring up, I want people to realize, both on the left and the right already despises the woman, but the people that support her and actually show up to cheer for her are stunningly ignorant of the facts. She is Rothschild's choice. So when we talk about the criminal international banking elite that are enslaving humanity to unrepayable levels of debt, we talk about the Rockefellers and the Rothschilds. And the Rothschilds have picked Hillary Clinton to be president. They held a $100,000 per head fundraiser for this woman, James. And people on the left have no idea. I've been saying for a long time now, James, that at this point in history, it's humanity versus the banksters. And if Hillary gets in the White House, it's going to be more of the same. More unconstitutional wars of U.S. Hegemony and imperialism, more debt, more for the banks, and less for the people.
Yeah, well, you've summed it up very well, Sean. We unfortunately have a broken political process. We have two thoroughly corrupted major political parties, and we have a mass media, the mainstream media, that is seriously in cahoots with them. So the chances of fixing this situation through traditional political means are pretty slim. Personally, what I'm actually hoping for is that there's some sort of economic reset, and coming out of that, we can reestablish a constitutional republic.
Yeah.
But the chances of that are very small.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think we're all worried that the chances of us regaining a republic are dwindling by the day. Having been in military intelligence, having been a military intelligence officer, James, what is your take on the current state of the U.S. military? Do you think people in the military are beginning to wake up to this tyranny that we see domestically? And do you think at the higher levels in the Pentagon, there are good guys that may be able to turn on these criminals, right? Look, if we arrested Kissinger, Zabriskie, Clinton, the Bushes, if certain individuals were brought to justice, we could take our country back, but I don't think we could do it without the military. What's your take on the current state of the military and the vibe among those who are serving our country?
Well, there's definitely a counter-statist vibe that's resonating all through the military right now, both in the non-commissioned officer corps and in the commissioned officer corps. A lot of the really high-ranking generals have been purged under the Obama administration,
Right.
very quietly. So what we have left are a lot of yes men who are just looking to round out their 20 years and or all the way to retirement as generals. Uh, they're just kind of marking time and trying not to make any waves and suffer through the absolute indignities that are being thrown at them. The latest is that the U.S. Navy is planning to name a ship after a county board of supervisors member who was killed many years ago simply because he was a homosexual. When I heard that news, I knew that any hope for our military was gone. If it's become that politicized and that much of a political football to be kicked around by the politicians, I certainly wouldn't want to be serving in the military at this time. And you mentioned previously that I did resign my commission right after Bill Clinton was inaugurated. That's because I didn't like the idea of him being my commander in chief. I saw what he stood for. And since my 6-year obligation was up, I was a reserve officer rather than a regular Army officer. I went ahead and resigned. I just couldn't abide by the thought of him being my commander in chief. And for anyone who has suffered through serving in the military under Obama and now potentially serving under Hitler rotten Clinton, boy, my heart really goes out to them.
Yeah, mine too. I mean, literally, it would be like serving the devil. And the people in the military, they don't deserve it. None of us deserve to have somebody like her sitting in the White House. None of us deserve to have rule of law destroyed. A lot of times they'll say people get what they deserve in their government. None of us deserve this. We don't deserve a woman who should be in prison for her crimes still being able to run for president in the Mockingbird mainstream media, giving her the green light at every turn and covering up for her crimes. Which brings me to the WikiLeaks leaks. As you know, whistleblower William Binney, formerly of the NSA, has said that the NSA has all of Clinton's deleted emails, which begs the question, did the NSA, are there good guys, and I know this is a bitter pill to swallow, good guys in the national security state, the NSA, I don't know, but do you think that the NSA had any role in this WikiLeaks Assange leak? Do you think that the NSA could have provided this data to WikiLeaks?
It's possible that there was either an individual or a group within the NSA that passed that information along to Assange or someone else in the WikiLeaks community. The thing that I'm waiting to see is, since the FBI director has passed on the opportunity to put forth a criminal referral against Hillary Clinton for her national security crimes, which were many and blatant. The question remaining is, what's in those other emails? I have a feeling that there's going to be a lot that comes out about the Clinton Foundation, and them literally selling influence within the United States government. With, I wouldn't be surprised to see a price list for, for passing legislation, for political appointments, or you name it. I wouldn't be surprised at all to see that come out in the course of these emails, because one thing about Hillary Clinton that's abundantly clear is that she's arrogant, and she operated for many years with the assumption that her email was secure. And I think it's going to be a very painful comeuppance to her when this next batch of emails comes out. Now, given the stupidity of the average American voter, though, I would not be surprised if, even if they know that that had happened, if she's not in prison, then they're going to go ahead and elect her president.
Yeah, I wonder about that. Well, first of all, let me say that I agree with you. She probably had a menu for treachery. You refer to a price list, and I don't think that's far off. I mean, these people are so blatantly criminal, and she is so egotistical and maniacal. I mean, she strikes me at this point of being worse than a sociopath. She's a psychopath because she's never bothered by her crimes. Like, she seems to be devoid of any conscience whatsoever. And now we continue to see these.
That's the very definition of a sociopath.
Yeah,
is someone who feels no remorse whatsoever for criminal behavior.
Well, and we continue to see these mysterious deaths of people that could testify against her. There was recently the death of somebody, I believe, at the UN, or who used to be involved with the United Nations, that could testify against her.
UN. Yeah, he was formerly the UN president. Yeah.
Right, and I believe he was scheduled to testify against the Clintons and the Clinton Foundation, or provide information about their criminality, just a few days before he was found deceased, mysteriously by like a barbell falling on his head. I mean, it's just complete ridiculousness. And it really is scary that these people are going to end up back in the White House, and they're going to steal the election, because as dumb as some of the American people are, James, as you've just noted, we also have to call attention to that DNC convention. There were many hundreds of empty seats before her coronation, and that was videotaped and shared by the director of the movie Gasland.
This is amazing. This place is empty. There is nobody left in here. Look at this. Look at this.
One of the areas that I'm particularly interested in is
empty seats.
children.
Empty seats.
Responsibility to ourselves, to our children, to each other.
You can't see it as well as when the lights were just on.
Everybody in this room and every child in this state
Empty
is
seats.
somebody. No matter
Like the entire California delegation is like gone.
our children's future is
Gone. Gone. Gone.
There were empty seats. I mean, people are so angry even within the DNC. Some of these delegates were so angry about what the DNC did to Bernie Sanders that now a lot of Democrats hate Hillary Clinton. I guess maybe that's the good news.
This is amazing. Like, this place is half empty all of a sudden. I can't believe my eyes. Like, I've never seen anything like this. This is the prime time of the Democratic National Convention, right after the nomination of Hillary Clinton, and this place is emptied out like crazy.
Sean, one bit of news from the DNC convention was that was overlooked, and I'm not sure, it hasn't been corroborated, but it's been alleged that the DNC even went so far as to set up white noise generators over the sections of seats where it was expected that some Bernie Sanders supporters were going to be sitting and heckling or booing Hillary Clinton so that it could not be heard on the audio system, or certainly not on any of the microphones that were being used by the national press. That is absolutely evil, to think that they would stoop that low to torpedo people within the Democratic caucus. It's just boggling. That's right up there with Stalin doing in his own generals.
Yeah, it's. I'm getting chills right now, actually, as we're having this conversation, because we're infusing this with a little bit of gallows humor, because it is really terrifying. The prospect of this woman getting in the White House and continuing this path to doom, this U.S. imperialist path to doom. Look, you deal with this type of content in your Patriots novel series. You're just such a skilled storyteller. You bring people to the brink of Armageddon in a lot of your novels. Let's talk about the prospect for a real Armageddon. Putin himself has been trying to warn the world about this irreversible path that we're on. And he literally, I think in his own words, said, I don't know how to get through to you people.
А система ПРО продолжает строиться. Значит, мы были правы, когда говорили, что нас обманывают. С нами неискренне, ссылаясь на якобы имеющуюся иранскую ядерную угрозу при строительстве системы ПРО. Ну так оно и есть на самом деле. В очередной раз пытались нас надуть на уши, как у нас говорят. А вы, в свою очередь, вешаете своему населению. И люди не чувствуют опасности. Вот меня что беспокоит. Ну как мы не можем понять? Мы тащим мир вообще в совершенно новое измерение. Вот в чем проблема. Делают вид, что как будто ничего не происходит. Но я не знаю даже, как достучаться.
NATO being aggressive and surrounding Russia. This government continuing to try to bully Putin and point to him on the world stage as being, the source of all evil. Putin himself is trying to warn us that we need to have a change within our own government. And I just wish to God that the American people would hear that message, James. What do you take of Putin's latest warning about the path to World War III, which the American government seems hell-bent on taking us into?
Well, before I address that, there's just one more thing I'd like to say about Hillary Clinton, and that is there's quite a bit of detail about what I expect her to do in a recent post that I put up at my blog. It was titled, Madame President Clinton's Coming War on the Blogosphere and Your Countermeasures. I would recommend that your listeners take a look at survivalblog.com and just do a search on the word blogosphere and my name, Rawles, Rawles, and it should come right up. It was actually reposted about 10 different websites. Please take a look at that, folks, and seriously consider what you're going to do if Hillary is elected president. Now on to Putin. I think that Putin is grandstanding a bit, but the threat is real. And we are closer to nuclear war now than we have been ever since the Berlin Wall came down. Because at this point, it's just a matter of brinksmanship. Whether it's Chinese posturing in the South China Sea, or whether it's a turf war over the Ukraine, doesn't really matter. We are kind of at the 11th hour of the potential for a full-blown intercontinental nuclear war. And, when I was an intelligence officer, I saw some of these gamed out. I was also a U.S. Army nuclear, biological, and chemical warfare qualified officer. And I got to see a lot of the gaming that went on with that. And unfortunately, as these exercises, these were all, purely hypothetical exercises, but as they were played out, with the players using the toolbox that they had and their set of rules that they had, it was not unusual. In fact, more times than not, the end result was a full-scale exchange. That is a really frightening thing, especially when you consider the state of American civil defense, which has been absolutely eviscerated ever since the days of Jimmy Carter.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely terrifying. And again, I think that this is a very sobering conversation that needs to be had because we really truly are standing on the brink of an irreversible path. If Hillary, rotten criminal crime family Clinton, gets back into the White House, she will take us to the brink. And I think the international banksters want to take us to the brink. They would probably love to go to World War III, and then when the economy collapses, they'll blame it on the war. Certainly it couldn't have been their fault with all their derivatives and their funny money and their magical printing presses of death. And that's the scariest damn part because we know she is a Rothschild puppet. I mean, I'm going to keep saying it. I'll scream it from the rooftops. She's a Rothschild, Rockefeller puppet. And those are the families that are going to take us into World War III, James.
I have to agree with you, Sean. If you look at the history of the world in the 20th century, the people who were seeking power often orchestrated events for multiple gains coming out of crises. And that's exactly what could happen with World War III and an international credit collapse. That in the midst of World War III, very few people are going to speak up and say, oh, no, wait a minute. You can't institute a global currency. And oh, no, you can't institute a global bank because in the midst of World War III, people are only going to be concerned about their immediate future and their physical security. The politicians and the bankers behind them are going to get away with all sorts of mischief in the midst of a war. If you look at the credit history of the U.S. government, the single largest run-up in the first 150 years of our nation's history, the biggest run-up of debt was during World War II. And it wasn't really even paid off until about the 1970s. It was a huge volume of debt. And if you think that we're seeing enormous debt levels now with $19 trillion officially on the books and about $50 trillion unofficially in long-term obligations, if you look at pensions and a lot of other things, if we go into World War III and go through a full-scale national mobilization on the order of what happened in World War II, we could see a debt level on the order of $100 trillion, and that would be accumulated over the course of just 2 or 3 years. Yeah. It's beyond sobering. It's just absolutely petrifying to think that already our grandchildren are saddled with this almost unpayable debt, but to think that they're going to absolutely wreck the global economy for the sake of feathering the nests of some international bankers is just devastating. We're going to see an accumulation of debt in the midst of a third world war that is almost unimaginable and absolutely impossible, mathematically impossible to ever pay back. And the only way that they can get out of that is through mass inflation of the currency. And then we would end up with an economy comparable to Robert Mugabe's Zimbabwe throughout all the Western nations. And as I'm sure you know, Sean, inflation is a hidden form of taxation. So essentially, they will rob us of all of our savings and all of our net worth in just a few years.
Well, yeah, and hyperinflation is a form of slavery. Once they hyperinflate our currency, they can turn us all into serfs, and we need look no further than Venezuela to see hell on earth from hyperinflation starting to take root right now. So I want to talk about Venezuela, but I just wanted to say one last thing before we get off this Hillary Clinton thing. I listen to a lot of different podcasts, James, the Mark Maron podcast, the Joe Rogan podcast to some degree. I work out a lot, so I'm always listening to different interviews. I kind of enjoy doing that, and I get real sick and tired of people coming on these shows, liberals constantly bashing Trump and calling him a madman, and never, ever addressing the fact that The alternative is a woman who is going to continue to demonize Putin versus a guy who says he would want to talk and have a conversation with Putin. The way to prevent World War III is to sit down like rational human beings and have a discussion. If we want to go to World War III, then elect the criminal, Hillary Clinton, who has a foundation from which billions of dollars are missing. I don't understand why these people never bring that up, James. I mean, literally, Charles Ortel has accounted for billions of dollars missing from the Clinton Foundation, billions alone stolen from the Haitian people, and you never hear these little rats talk about the fact that she literally is a hardcore criminal, so is her husband. There's billions of dollars missing from the world's poorest through their foundation that have been looted, stolen, or otherwise hidden away somewhere. And adding to that, the IRS is investigating the Clinton Foundation. You never hear these people talk about that. She's a hardcore criminal, and yet they'll just demonize Trump as being a madman. It mystifies me.
Yeah, we do unfortunately live in interesting times. I refer to our current era as the age of deception and betrayal. And I think that pretty well sums it up.
Yeah, it does. Well, let me ask you this. Time is relatively short. We could well see the onset of a 1930s-like Great Depression. That was a quote from James the last time we spoke. James, again, let's end on Venezuela. Let's end on precious metals. Have you been surprised to see silver vault as high as it's vaulted this year? It's up, I think, 45%. It's the world's number one performing asset. Gold, I think, is the world's number 3 or 4 best performing asset. These precious metals will help people survive a hyperinflationary collapse like we're seeing in Venezuela. And again, I don't think most of our friends, neighbors, and colleagues own any.
Yes, it's not too surprising seeing the level of debt that's been accumulated. Seasonally, however, it's surprising to see gold and silver perform as strongly as they have through the months of June and July, because traditionally the summer months are considered doldrum months for precious metals. In fact, there's a lot of people who just seasonally trade, and they will buy precious metals each July and sell precious metals each November. And if you stick to that in the long term, people have made huge fortunes that way, just over the seasonal swing in precious metals. But surprisingly, this year, there were no summer doldrums. And in fact, we saw a summer rally in silver and gold. And like you, I'm a big believer in silver. I think that silver has a much better chance of doubling than gold. It's kind of like buying penny stocks. It's a lot easier for silver to go from $20 an ounce to $40 an ounce than it is for gold to jump to $2,000 or $3,000 an ounce. It's a shorter jump, and it's also a thinner market, so the swings in the market can be larger. Although with that volatility, you also have to have a really steady constitution to basically ignore the day-to-day swings and look at the long-term trends. Because if you watch the market too closely, it's a very scary roller coaster ride.
Well, so many of us have looked at precious metals pragmatically, especially over the last 4 or 5 years, James, because the banking cartel has ruthlessly slammed the prices of silver, really even more than gold, slammed the price of silver ruthlessly through the paper machinations, their paper criminality. But because of the foundation of the Shanghai Gold Exchange in China, we see a move towards physical pricing in the East, which is causing the West to have to try to keep pace with that real world pricing. And that is why I think we've seen silver go from 13 and change this year up to 2050, I think, as we're having this conversation. It's just moved past its 50-month moving average, which is a very big deal, as I just spoke about in a recent interview with Andy Hoffman. Last question. What's happening right now in Venezuela, James, tells us a very important narrative about what could happen here. What is that narrative, and how should people learn from what we're seeing happening in Venezuela right now? What should they do to protect themselves should that happen here?
Well, I think Venezuela is kind of a microcosm for a centrally planned government and currency run amok. And we need to learn from their example. If you'll notice, the things that people are clamoring for are tangibles. they're looking for food, and they're looking for currencies that are inflation proof. And that usually means precious metals. So if we're going to learn anything from Venezuela, it's tangibles, tangibles, tangibles. You folks listening to this need to wake up, watch what's happening in Venezuela. You need to get your beans, bullets, and band-aids squared away. Those tangible items are going to be what pulls your family through the hard times ahead. And regardless of what happens to currencies, if you have a honest 1 year supply of food stockpiled for your family, preferably 2 years, and a good core position in physical precious metals that you hold at home, hidden, not in a bank, because banks are vulnerable to banking holidays where they would limit or eliminate access to your safe deposit box. But if you have those tangibles, food, silver, and my other favorite is common caliber ammunition. That's the other thing you really should stock up on heavily. Right now, supplies are decent. I have a feeling that as we get closer to the election, and if it looks like the poll numbers are leaning toward Hillary winning, there's going to be a massive run on firearms, bigger than we've ever seen before. And along with that, people are going to be rushing to buy basically any ammunition they can, reloading components, and full capacity magazines. All of those are going to be tremendously short supply. And the law of supply and demand dictates that when there's less supply and greater demand, prices only go one direction, and that's up. So consider your food stockpile as a survival stockpile for your family, something that's not to be touched other than normal rotation of your food. Your silver as a long-term hedge and as a potential barter currency, and common caliber ammunition and full capacity magazines, and I'm talking the most standard ones, things like AR-15 and AK and Glock magazines, for example. Stock up on those because those are going to be practically worth their weight in gold if everything falls apart. So again, folks, tangibles, tangibles, tangibles.
Well, very good. Thank you for that. And one last thing here. You got your BA in journalism. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yes. Yeah. I also had minor degrees in history, and military science.
Yeah. Well, you and I have the journalism thing in common. I also got my BA in journalism. And the reason I bring it up is because you mentioned the polls. You said if the polls are showing Hillary in the lead, gun sales will explode. Reuters and the Associated Press are part of the Rothschild portfolio of assets. And Reuters, after Trump took a 7-point lead in the polls recently, Reuters just decided to reconfigure its algorithm for conducting these polls and concluding the results of these polls. So they're tweaking the polls now in favor of Hillary. That's how criminally corrupt this system is, guys. And when I say that Hillary is Rothschild's choice, I'm not kidding around. $100,000 per head fundraiser, and they'll just tweak the Reuters polls to get her into the White House. This is a banana republic, I think, at this point, James.
It's beyond that, yes. We're verging on a Hugo Chavez banana republic because the statists and collectivists and the haters of individual liberty are at the helm.
No truer words have ever been said in this broadcast. James, you've written so many wonderful books. Do you have a favorite? What is your favorite book that you've written? Let's tell people about your books.
Well, I'd rather tell people about my website because that's all free. I recommend that they go take a look at survivalblog.com. And it's been published for, almost 11 years now. It has over 60,000 archived articles and letters and column items that are fully searchable, fully accessible. There's no super secret members only area. It's all free of charge. Please, folks, take full advantage of that. Find the most crucial articles for your personal circumstances and print out hard copies. You should be making reference binders on everything from recipes to the owner and service manuals for every piece of equipment you own. please take full advantage of the archives at survivalblog.com. And you got to print out hard copy, because I have a feeling that under the Hillary Clinton administration, there's going to be a real war on blogs. And under the hate speech laws and under the fairness doctrine and just about every other trick imaginable, as I just wrote about that in my blog yesterday, they're going to try to shut down American blogs that are dissident voices. So it's important that you print out hard copies and make your reference binders now. And a lot of the articles from the first 2 years of my blog were captured in a best-selling book from Penguin Books. It's called How to Survive the End of the World as We Know It. And you can sometimes find used copies for as little as $2 or $3 on eBay or Amazon.com. That's a good, quick way to avail yourself of some of the information. But even for someone who's on a very limited budget, someone who's a pensioner or college student or whatever, please take the time to print out hard copies of the most important articles. Again, my site is survivalblog.com.
Okay, very good. James, you're a stand-up guy. Thanks so much for spending this much time with us today. We very much appreciate it.
Thank you, Sean, and may God bless your listeners.
All right, and God bless you, sir. Guys, that's James Wesley Rawles, and the website is survivalblog.com, and we really do appreciate your support. Thanks for listening, thanks for liking, and thanks for sharing this very important information with your friends, neighbors, colleagues, anybody that you love, anybody that you think needs to wake up. This may be the impetus to help them do that. Guys, thanks for checking out sgtreport.com. Real news, 24/7. God bless. Bye-bye.